There I was playing video games when suddenly I thought to myself, I wonder, how does English language acquisition affect the equity gap? That's right, today I will be discussing the equity gap and how English language acquisition affects it. So first, I should explain what exactly the equity gap is. Well, it's this. But the way it was simply explained to me was that it is the gap in graduation rates between white students and non-white students. Why is there a gap? Well, there are several reasons as to why, but today I'm going to focus on the problems affecting students known as English language learners. Let's start with an excerpt from the article Bilingual Education versus English Immersion. Quote, Miriam Flores remembers that her daughter Miriam was doing well in her first 2 years in school in the border town of Nogales, Arizona. She knew how to read and write in Spanish, Flores says of her daughter, now a college student. She would even correct a teacher on accents and spelling. In the 3rd grade, however, Miriam began having difficulties. Her grades went down and she began having nightmares. Miriam's mother has a simple explanation for the change. In the early 1990s, Nogales provided bilingual education, teaching English learners in both their native language and English, but only through the first 2 grades. It was the language, Flores says. Miriam's new teacher did not speak Spanish, taught only in English, and seemed uninterested in Miriam's language difficulties, Flores says. Miriam is a very quiet child, and I thought it was strange that the teacher would say that she talked a lot, Flores recalls today. Then Miriam told me, I asked the other kids what the teacher is saying. She didn't understand. End quote. This is one story that shows how a school district's decision can cause English language learners to fall behind in school. I mean, imagine that. You're expected to learn all of this new material in a language you don't completely understand, and here we have Miriam had to deal with all of this. She's only in 3rd grade. Problems like this is why studies have shown that the equity gap among English language learners is the largest. A Stanford study found that minority students are making gains and closing the gap, but the one exception was English language learners. The study showed that the gap for 8th grade reading between English language learners and white students with similar socioeconomic backgrounds was around 34 points. Furthermore, there were no improvements in closing the gap in math. Why is the gap among English language learners so large? One reason is that teachers are not being properly trained to handle English language learners in their classrooms. The article English Learners and the Growing Need for Qualified Teachers shows that only 24% of programs train general elementary teacher candidates in strategies to support English learners or students not making progress in early reading. The article also shows that many states do not require English learners teachers to have an English learners certification or English learners training beyond what's required by federal law. Putting all this information together points to a problem of institutional racism in education. By failing to provide the help needed and failing to have teachers properly trained, the education system is discriminating against English language learners, thus an example of institutional racism. This is why 41% of English language learners take more than 4 years to graduate from high school, which brings us back to the equity gap. Does English language acquisition affect the equity gap? Yes. Yes, it does. Hey, thanks for watching. If you'd like to check out any of the articles I mentioned in the video, there'll be links in the description. See ya.